All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for your participation and joining us in this webinar. I'm here with Oscar Larson and hopefully soon Reggie Henry will be joining us from ASAE. And we want to share with you the story of how American Association of Geographers went virtual with their annual meeting. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that we have over 1,500 people participating in this, so we turned the chat off. And if you have questions, feel free to use the QA button at the bottom of the screen. We'll be setting aside some time at the end of this to handle your questions as they come through. Finally, the presentation will be recorded, and we'll send this recording to all the attendees, probably by Monday. So as I said, about 1,500 people are on this webinar. The breakdown of the people that are participating are mostly trade associations, but we also saw a lot of meeting planners and event technology companies. So we tried to format the content in a way to help everyone out. We recognize that this is a bizarre time, and it's a time when everyone's trying to figure things out and move quickly. So our mindset is let's consolidate the notes and let's share them. So people that we historically might not have talked to directly before, we're more than willing and eager to work with all parties, right? We all are kind of trying to get through this together. So the questions, we asked you when you registered for the webinar to submit some questions, and the questions kind of broke out into the following areas. So some were related to the platform, like what was the tech stack that was used? A lot was related to networking, engagement, retaining sponsorship revenue. And then some other parts were cost related, like recovering costs from the hotels or maybe being able to price these things into the future. So we hope to cover all of this. And as we get started, once again, just waiting on Reggie to join. Hopefully he'll be able to participate along with this. But as he joins, we have Oscar here. So I just kind of want to break out to Oscar for a second. Maybe I'll stop the screen share just to say hello, introduce everyone who you are, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the content.
Thank you very much, Kunal. I'm very happy to be here and share. I am the conference director for the American Association of Geographers, and on March 11th, we sent an email to all of our attendees that our meeting April 6th was going to be canceled. And at the same time, we started letting them know that we're going to transition to virtual. So that's kind of how this conversation got started. We're very fortunate in preparing for this because I had already planned to have a small portion of the meeting occur as sort of a hybrid virtual option. So we had done a little bit of the legwork already, and we were in a position to sort of pivot that way. And I'm really glad we did. And I guess if we get one message across, it's that this is really powerful. It's possible to do, and it's possible to do well. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. We didn't have a whole lot of time, but you can learn from what we did and do a great job of it, I'm sure. And as we all keep doing this moving forward, we'll come up with really good ideas about how to improve engagement and how to improve networking and how to make the experience really wonderful for everyone that's there.
Okay, thanks for that brief introduction. So we'll go ahead and restart the presentation. So today's agenda of what we're going to cover is your decision to go virtual. And I really want to highlight you have to make that decision really early on. We're going to talk through the technology you used, cover some of the costs, and then brainstorm some of the ideas that you had with regards to sponsorship and networking. Finally, we'll close out with some insights from what you actually sent out a survey to the meeting attendees. So let's talk about the decision. April 6th was your meeting originally planned. How many weeks before did you cancel? And can you tell us a little bit about what the sentiment was like before you made that decision?
Well, we were all very nervous. So on March 11th, I think that gives us about 3.5 weeks before our meeting was supposed to start on April 6th. That's the day we sent it out. But for the few days before that, we'd been trying to figure out what to do. And I think what we noticed was that, at a certain point, the writing was on the wall. This was going to happen. And so we'd started trying to figure out what to do before we actually sent the message. And we wanted to get the wording right. Communication is really key in this. We polled our members to see if they would be willing to attend. If we were able to have it, we found they were not. That really just gave us the confidence that we needed to cancel the meeting. And
do you remember what the sentiment was like? Like, did people want you Did people want you to cancel,
Yeah,
or did people want you to keep the event?
absolutely. No, our members definitely were way more likely to want us to cancel, although we did have feedback that it was really too bad to have to cancel. I mean, nobody wanted us to cancel, but under the circumstances, everybody was really pushing for it. Not everybody, but the majority was really pushing for the cancellation at that point.
Hmm.
And so, it made the decision somewhat easy for us.
And when you guys canceled, did you cancel first and then shift to virtual, or was it the same time decision?
So we made the decision that we were going to run a virtual conference one way or the other. We didn't have any idea how we were going to do that. But we did announce that in our cancellation message that we would also be doing a virtual option for the meeting.
Great. And hey, welcome, Reggie. Thank you so much for joining. If you want to unmute yourself, we'll just say a quick hello.
Hey folks, how you doing? First of all, I apologize. I just got off of a webinar to get onto this webinar. So
no, we really appreciate it. So Reggie is the CIO of ASAE. And as a lot of you who are here joining, you know that ASAE had to shift their MMC. First, they canceled it, and then they moved it all virtual. And Reggie's going to share some of the insights learned there as well, along with bring some of the general questions from the association world at large. So Oscar, you put together a lot of resources for attendees, speakers, and sponsors, and we're going to provide links to them for all of the people here watching. So just thank you so much for that. I want to cover some of the things that you had sent. And once again, for everyone who's watching, we'll make these available to you post-webinar. The first was, as you said, March 11th, you sent this email, and that was like a crazy time because that was before a lot of people had to even think about this. So I saw that 60% you sent a survey before you sent this email?
Correct. Yeah, about a week and a half before.
Wow, and it was overwhelming that people were going to be unwilling or discouraged from attending.
Yeah.
Crazy. So I noticed alongside of that, you set up a website, and then you also put together a participant FAQ and a presenter and speaker toolkit. So I don't want to talk too thoroughly about these now, but I do want to share with everyone that these are kind of open documents that you'll be able to take, download, and then use for your own purposes. And they really talk about the specifics of how to run these events and how to set up your video, how to test things beforehand. Before I continue, Oscar, is there anything about these that you think are worth highlighting specifically?
When you're considering moving to virtual, there's a couple of different options. And just, for us, we wanted to experiment. So we went with trying a few different things, but there's synchronous, there's asynchronous, and depending on your content, one of those is going to be more powerful than the other.
Okay, thanks for that. So we'll definitely cover some more of that later on. So I want to talk through the tech stack that you ended up using. So of course you use OpenWater for the gallery. You're able to use OpenWater to organize the sessions, allow for authentication so that people could log in through your AMS and the system would know who they are to put them into the correct sessions. You came to me with this idea early on, but you never really talked to me about if you had explored other things before you had brought it up. So maybe for people that are here looking at different tools, can you talk through some of the options you were considering and why you decided that the gallery was the main home for this content?
Well, I spent a lot of time thinking how I wanted to present a virtual hybrid conference, and the idea being that some of the people would be remote and some of the people would be at your physical conference. And so in the fall, when we had been looking at this, I was trying to imagine how that would work because it's sort of complicated to pipe someone in. What I realized is that the place people are going for the information is the place that makes the most sense to give it to them. And it makes sense to me that that's the session gallery where you have the times and the events that are happening and people can make their agenda there, because then it's all in one place and they don't have to go anywhere else. So the more you can keep people there, that virtual place becomes the spot where the meeting takes place. Whereas in person, you're in a city in Denver, San Francisco, you're at a hotel at the Sheraton or the Hyatt, and the meeting takes place in rooms and places, but you want to keep people engaged in this virtual event and not fragment too much. You want to try and keep the experience packaged inside of something. And I think to me at the time, I thought the galleries made the perfect match for that. And so that's what I brought up brought up
It
to
makes
you.
sense. And I think for the people listening, right, if you're getting a lot of sessions and people are typically searching their agenda online, the gallery makes sense. But what you're suggesting is some sort of website is a good home for this content, as opposed to like on the mobile app.
Yeah, I think so. You know, when you're watching these from your office, you're watching them on your computer. I'm imagining more likely than your mobile phone. And I could be wrong there. I don't have stats on that, but I still think the galleries are a more centralized place for it, rather than the mobile app being so much more. At least the one we use being so much more specific to navigating the physical meeting.
Yeah, and we're all clearly at our offices right now.
Right.
All right, so you ended up using Zoom as the primary conduit for the meeting and webinar players, but as you mentioned earlier, you did a lot of experiments and you tried all the tools. Can you kind of just give me the rundown of why you picked Zoom as the home for the primary sessions and what your experience was like with some of the other tools you used?
Yeah, so we tried to go to meetings. We tried, I took a look at a platform called Shindig. I took a look at some of the other web tools. What I found when I started asking my participants how we could transition this within the 3.5 weeks that we had was that they were familiar with Zoom, and a lot of them already had Zoom licenses from their universities. So being an academic conference with academics who are presenting their research, the fact that they were familiar with the tool kind of sold it to me, and that was very helpful. And as we used it more, I found it just to be more intuitive and easier to manage. So ultimately, about half of the sessions we ran with our Zoom licenses, and the other half were the session organizer provided their own Zoom meeting room, either a meeting or a webinar for those. And we did test out GoToMeeting as well for one of the webinars that we ran. And I think ultimately, if you're comfortable with something, there's no need to jump ship, but we found Zoom to be super powerful, really, really easy to use. And we didn't run into any lags.
Recap is that if you're already using GoToMeeting or something, if you already have licenses, there's no reason to switch tools. But if you're picking a new tool, you found Zoom to be the one that a lot of people already had comfort with.
Absolutely, especially the way we did it, where some people were managing their own.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, it's good to know, right? Because it's hard enough to switch one technology. If you're already comfortable with it, I think that's what it sounds like. Stick with what you're comfortable with. It also sounds like you used Vimeo to retain recordings and in some cases live stream. So now when you're live streaming, I know there's that 30-second delay. Do you know if that impacted engagement at all? And is there a case where you think live streaming makes sense versus the typical webinar format?
I think live streaming makes sense when you're going from in-person meeting out to the virtual meeting. But ultimately what we found was the delay reduced the engagement that we were experiencing. The chat functionality, the questions showed up to the presenters in the wrong time format. You know, it's 30 seconds delayed, and so they weren't able to address them. I mean, the chat's live, but the questions come in and you've already passed that point in your talk. So it's not quite as good. And what we found with presenting in either Zoom meetings or webinars was that people could use the chat functionality and the Q&A. They were really powerful tools to like direct what the presenter was doing if they're giving a live presentation. Some of the presentations were pre-recorded, and then they followed up with questions and answers. And I just think it's a little more intimate when you have a meeting or a webinar and everyone's sort of present in the same platform.
All right, that's helpful. So just to recap there, you think that a live stream would be really good for a hybrid conference where you're taking whatever's going on in person, you're pushing that out, the delay there is acceptable and you're able to add engagement. You think that maybe that's adding a complexity for right now. It's not something that if people are pressed with time, it's where the priority should be spent.
Yeah, I don't think it really adds a lot to what we tried to accomplish. In fact, I preferred it when we moved away from it.
Okay.
I think our attendees did too.
I think one other thing I wanted to highlight, which was just something very special as I've talked with you more and more about this, is that you were able to keep on as many of your vendors as possible. And as I mentioned earlier in this call, that around 400 people that are joining this webinar are event professionals, and they're worried about, well, what's going to happen to my my deals, right? Like I had all these customers, they're moving virtual. How can I still help them? And you were able to continue to use, for the most part, the same people you're going to pay to help you at your physical conference to help you online. So my main question was, how did the people adapt to the needs? Do you think that was a good decision, or do you think that people were kind of winging it and it didn't work out?
Oh, I think it was a good decision. I mean, I always strive to be the best partner I can. And it really was, personally painful for me to see so much business being lost as a result of this. And so I wanted to do as much as I could. I mean, AAG did, we all did, wanted to do as much as we could to keep things going for us at least, and for the partners that we work with. So absolutely, it made a huge impact. I mean, I think the biggest piece that we used was using projection AV for the tech support. That was huge because for the sessions that we ran from the AAG Central, having someone in the room that knew what they were doing was really, really valuable. And I think it made the presentation experience for the presenters so much better. We still had to communicate with all of our exhibitors. Conference managers has been great working with us for years on that.
So all the logistical burden was still there.
Exactly.
Right? And needed people to handle that. And I just want to highlight that besides IMIS, OpenWater doesn't have a formal partnership with any of the other companies discussed here. I mean, Zoom, GoToMeeting, we're happy to work with all of them. We're happy to work with all these vendors. But in talking with Oscar, I just thought it was very special that he was able to salvage those deals. And I bet a lot of other events directors and conference directors are thinking the same thing, that how can we keep the community going? These people have helped us for 2 decades with our meeting. All of a sudden, everyone's out. And I thought that was just special. So the other thing I learned from you was you had this concept of distributed sessions where you use the gallery to let people advertise their sessions, but you didn't help them with the tech. They kind of provided their own tech. Can you talk through how that worked? Was that a disaster, or did that work out well? Did that,
No, I think it worked out fine. People provided us with their own virtual meeting links, so that most of it was Zoom. I think a few people used Blue Jeans. So basically we let them use the sessions, put their event in the gallery, and you could join it. I think the thing that I learned when we first started talking about the possibility of canceling, and the thing I wanted to avoid, the main reason I wanted to go virtual from the get-go, was some of these sessions were going to happen whether or not we were going to host a virtual meeting. And I didn't want to have the whole meeting fragment, because then we lose our whole purpose. Only the people interested in those sessions would be able to go to those sessions. You couldn't stumble upon them the way you do at a normal conference. So I wanted to make sure we kept everything under our gallery so that the content was available to all of the people who had registered.
Okay, thank you for that. Good insight. And it reminds me actually of the snowpocalypse when ASAE Tech was canceled. There was like an unofficial unconference going on Twitter during that time. And now it's pretty much the same thing for everyone, but you have a little bit more time to plan. So that idea of, if someone really wants to talk about their content, they're gonna do it. They're gonna go on YouTube and they're gonna live stream it or whatever. So for you to retain that with AAG hosting that brand, allowing the distributed sessions, create that option. So thank you for that insight. I want to talk a little bit about engagement and networking. So can you talk a little bit about, I know you had very little time, so we'll talk a little bit more at length about ideas you have for the future, but with your very, very short period of time, anything you could talk through about how the tools were used, the Q&A, the live chat, the polling, and did it work? Did people actually participate, or was it like staring at a screen all day?
People absolutely participated, and I think the ones that attended sessions really got a lot out of those sessions. The use in the Q&A was pretty heavy, and the live chat was pretty heavy. I don't think I saw any polls being used. They may have been used on the platforms where we weren't managing them, but not in the ones where we were managing them. Couple of interesting things did come out of this too. We had a few sessions where none of the presenters showed up, but some audience showed up. And we turned those sessions over to the audience to let them use that time to just chat with each other. And that was just kind of a neat little serendipitous thing that, they enjoyed. And it made, it planted the seed for me about how, with the little time we had, we didn't
Oh.
do enough for networking. I mean,
Time permitting, I'd love to ask some follow-up questions about that.
yeah.
That's why I didn't even know that. Something I learned today talking with you. All right, so one thing I did learn about before in preparing for this was that you had these things called coffee sessions. What was this coffee session?
So one of the things that happens at a conference is you network with the people and mentorship happens. So for AAG, and this is something that we've been planning for our hybrid conference, is how can we give value to the people who aren't able to attend in person, who don't get that hallway experience? Well, now we're using it for everybody who's not able to attend in person. So we got a few sort of higher, like later career academics who are good mentors to volunteer their time. And we set up a form that interested early career faculty could fill out to sort of set up a time to chat with these people about whatever, was on their mind. And the feedback on this was great. The use wasn't huge, but the feedback was really good and people really liked it. So more time permitting, I would have definitely highlighted this more and spent more time figuring out how to make this work even better, because I think it was a great addition. The people who the late career faculty who ran them said that the discussions went really well and they enjoyed it. And the early career faculty that had joined in for mentoring said that they got a lot of value out of it. So I think it was really good to have that as an addition to the meeting.
Okay, so to recap, it was kind of like a small group session, like a tableside chat with a distinguished person, and people that really wanted to find out about that person's research could pop in and have like a, kind of like if I went to a book reading afterwards, I could talk to the author and maybe 5-7 people stick around. Is it something like that?
Yeah, probably similar to that, but maybe more in the line of, hey, I'm sort of interested in your research and I do something similar. How do I get to be where you are? Like that was.
So almost like a advertising of, hey, I want to chat about this. And it could kind of help people come to those groups. So like an ad hoc session, but a little bit more than ad hoc with a little bit of pre-planning. Hey,
Sure.
Everyone wants to talk about this. Come join me in this room.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Does that happen at real events?
Absolutely. I mean, we have so much space at meetings. We're constantly, handling meeting requests for people who just want a room for like 5 people to get together and have a chat. So it really does address one of those sort of serendipitous things that happens at conferences, where you bump into people in the hallway and you want to have a chat. And in some ways, it probably opens it up a little more, because if you're the type of person that's not comfortable approaching someone, you may be feeling more comfortable doing it in this format than you would just approaching someone in the hallway.
Right. I really like that. And I like the use of the gallery to showcase that, because for me, as someone who's been to many conferences, I've never done that, right? And I didn't even know it happened. But if I had known it would happen, I kind of seek out those intimate conversations rather than just hearing the academic presentations. So I just want to talk a little bit about sponsors. Were you able to retain any of your sponsorship revenue?
Yeah, so I told my sponsors that we were canceling the meeting and we would love to keep their money if they would let us, and we would just try to do whatever we could to host them. So we kind of kept that going, and most of them were probably going to transition to the next year, but we did keep a few dollars, and I think they understand. Everyone's in the same boat, so we're all just trying to work together to make sure that we get through this.
Okay, and I remember on the website I saw like hey, we're refunding all of our fees, but there's like a donation option. Did anyone use that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to recap the cancellation, we offered everyone a refund, a full refund, and they could still participate in the virtual meeting for free. So anybody who had registered before that March 11th date, we would give them all their money back and they could participate for free. And I think we got about a little over 100 people that wanted to donate some money, and I think we got about $1,700 in donations. Just small.
Okay, small, but
donations.
It covers something, right? Covers
Absolutely.
Your bill or whatever.
Absolutely.
And then I also saw that you allowed people that you didn't, so you waived it for everyone who had bought a ticket in advance, but the people that didn't buy a ticket and wanted to join virtual only, you charged them, or at least that's what I saw on your website.
That's
Did
correct.
anyone end up registering when you went all virtual that previously did not register for the conference?
Yeah, we had nearly 400 people sign up afterwards.
Okay. Do you mind sharing what you charged?
We charged $20 for students, $10 for students, $20 for members, and $40 for non-members.
Okay. It's pretty nominal, but you got 400 people to pay, which is
Yeah.
more than the donation. So it just chipped away at, because even though it's not the small potatoes, but it's all cost at this point. So that's nice to hear just a couple of small ideas that people might be hesitant that, oh, I don't want to ask for donations. That doesn't seem right. Well, if people want to donate, let them donate. And if people want to pay, let them pay. And it sounds like people are more than willing to pay a rate of whatever they feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And I mean, the numbers that I came up with were certainly experimental and not probably not sustainable, but that was sort of how we were planning to go with the hybrid virtual. Like if people were attending virtually in our hybrid model, you know, we already had that pricing set up. So that was fortunate because we didn't have to think that through at the time.
Yeah. And I also saw in the survey results, you asked a suggested amount. So we'll cover that when we cover your survey amounts. I just wanted to pause for a second for everyone who's on the call about ideas for sponsorship. OpenWater, well, historically, we sponsor 50 to 60 events a year, and all of that's kind of gone out the window. And people are asking us, like, what would you sponsor? What would you pay for? And I just listed out a couple of things. I know the slide has been here for a while, and we'll publish it after the fact, but maybe while I have Oscar just participating, are there any ideas here that you guys would consider for a future virtual event that sound like they would work for you? Or
Yeah.
anything that you feel like a total hard nose?
I think none of them are hard nosed. They all look like good ideas to me. I think finding a way to get the sponsors more engaged is key. I think even bringing them into the content more than you might otherwise do, having them sponsor some meetings and sessions, I think it could be really good.
Yeah, I think
but
as long
all
as
of these
it's labeled as
ideas
a
here,
sponsored session, it would be reasonable. You know, I think people are understanding. But just wanted to pitch these to the audience at large. These are things that we would pay the places that are canceling their events, right? 50, 60 places. We would pay our sponsorship money on these kinds of things. So consider it. So were you able to recover anything? So I just want to talk a little bit more about costs, and then we'll head over to Q&A. Were you able to recover anything from the hotels or any of that?
So we wanted to work with our hotel partners because they've been really, you know, good with us leading up to the meeting, and you know, we really valued those relationships. So instead of trying to use our force majeure clause to get out of the contract, we decided that we would first try to reschedule the meeting, which we did. So we were fortunately able to reschedule our meeting until that was in Denver this year to be in 2023, and we were able to get space for that. So that was just lucky.
So basically, they just hold your deposit for 3 years, but
Yes.
you don't lose it, and they're okay, and they don't charge you the rest of it. So you're able to salvage at least the upfront second payment of the event for now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's an idea that, like, in my mind, I'd be looking at cancellation, right? But if you can delay and just not spend more cash, a lot of people are trying to hold on to cash right now. So that's an outlet. And then you talked to me earlier that with the short amount of time and kind of the hodgepodge of tools and retaining your like existing teams, you spent somewhere in the ballpark of 20, 25K for tech and AV help. You had technology, you had the Zoom, you had the Vimeo, you had contractors helping you, and you also had a couple of staff. You also told me a little bit about how if you had more time, you typically have volunteers that help you at your event. Can you tell me about a little bit about your idea with volunteers?
So I think having the AV tech help is really, really good for us. The challenge for AAG is that you know, you kind of need one-to-one for these sessions, and I think it would get prohibitively expensive for us to pay for that. So we have in the past hired grad students to be sort of conference monitors at the physical meeting, where they can, you know, check in on sessions to make sure that things are going well, and they know the number to call the AV tech help if someone's having trouble with the projector. And so I sort of see that, you know, a similar role could be analogous here with some type of helper.
And it looks like you started creating the guides for that as for the distributed sessions. So I'd imagine the guides that you've already shared could help people that are looking to have volunteers do some of the legwork.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. All right, I just want to quickly cover the insights from your survey, and thank you so much for sharing the aggregate data of your survey. first thing that was eye-opening to me was that considering you had no time to pivot, people were generally happy with your event. Did you already, like, when did you guys talk internally about these numbers? Was AAG happy with this, or did you guys feel like, why don't we get at least a 4?
I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah, I think, you know, it's a small enough sample that it doesn't. I think we would get 4 if we'd had more people replying. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
All right, I'll give you that. The other thing I thought was interesting was generally people in the younger range of the bracket and the older range of your bracket were slightly happier than the people who might be dealing with small kids. I don't know, that was my insight from this. What did you gather from this?
I think that's certainly, you know, that's something that I hadn't considered when we discussed it the other day, but you know, that group is probably the more precarious group in our segment. The ones who are early career and mid-career and who are having to run all of their, you know, they're teaching online now, they're doing childcare, they're at home, and they have to do all their publishing as well. So I think that group is probably under a lot more stress than.
Yeah, so maybe something to think about is how to handhold that group a little bit more. That way they can just participate, enjoy, and then get back to what they were doing. And the other areas who have more time to participate, you know, we're just guessing. We don't know the details, right? This is the first survey.
Right.
Other interesting questions were, would you attend a virtual meeting? It was mostly maybes, you know? So it sounds like people weren't like, no, this was so bad, I don't want to come to it. It was like, you know what, I'd give it a shot. I'd think about it. And there was more yeses than nos overwhelmingly. So I thought that was just nice to see for the audience. Do you have any intel on that, or you just?
That's all I know. I haven't thought too much more about it. I mean, we're going to be doing this one way or the other, so.
Yeah, and then some of the qualitative comments I thought were great, where more or less everyone wanted at a minimum a virtual hybrid option for the future. And some people even expressed that by going into those smaller chat rooms, you get to talk to people that you might have been otherwise afraid to engage with. So I thought that was really cool about this also, that surprisingly, find the numbers say one side of the story, but the actual comments that came through show that people are willing to do this. It's not just, hey, I'm going to stare at a screen all day for 5 days. It's like, no, I get to meet with people and I want the virtual option again.
Right. I'm really encouraged by those.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to just give Reggie a moment here to unmute himself. I know he has some questions from the ASAE community at large. So thank you so much, Reggie, for joining us. And if there's anything you wanted to add based on what you've seen from moving MMC over to virtual, and then after you give your set of questions, we'll allow the audience's questions to ask the 3 of us anything that's on their mind. So thanks, Reggie, and welcome.
Thank you for having me here. There's a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to be brief with my questions. And if that's okay with you, I'll walk through some of the questions that are there in the Q&A. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, ask a couple, and then we'll have Zach actually moderate the Q&A questions.
Good, good. So from my perspective, I'll just tell you just a couple of things I'm taking from this time we have right now. The first thing I'm taking from this is that technologies are out there to help us do pretty much whatever we want to do. And so I applaud Oscar for kind of grabbing the bull by the horns, if you will. And man, it takes courage to do that in normal times, but doing it in times of crisis, although it feels like a necessity, it's still a pretty daunting thing. So cool that you did that. You know, it's on my mind now, and you spoke a little bit about it, but we have to prepare our organizations and our organization's members that this virtual thing isn't just now, it's going to be a thing. And so we have to start to teach, if you will, teach our members how to participate this way. You know, even in the short run, we don't know how long this is going to last. You know, all these numbers floating around, and some states doing it, and some states not, and all of that. We don't know how long this is going to last. So something we need to be concerned about. And so I had a couple of questions just based on what you presented, Oscar. You know, given that we now have the gift of being kind of locationless and timeless now, you know, if you wanted to, did you do anything different for this event that you might not have considered doing in a live event?
Well, I didn't, mainly because of the time constraints in setting it up. But there are some things I would absolutely consider, which is, you're going to run into problems with time zones for something like this. So, we're really careful to keep the time zone that we had started with so that we didn't have to reinvent anything and confuse anybody. Even doing that, we had some people get confused and start their sessions earlier, which is okay.
Right.
The other thing I would say is, we had 20-minute breaks between sessions. I think we could probably get away with shortening those. Typically we're letting people move between session rooms, get their drink of water and so forth, but you could probably get away with 5 or 10 minutes. There's not as much of a need for such a prolonged lunch break, but I think there is a better way to use the break time throughout the day. But you can also hold sessions really early in the morning and really late at night. We have about 30 to 35% international attendees. So I think, building some of the sessions that would be more, if we can figure out what they're interested in and put those sessions at a time of day that would be more convenient to them, that would be a good thing too. But since they were all recorded, people can also come back and watch them afterwards.
Cool. So another question, and I don't know if I put this on the list we had ahead of time or not, but I wanted to ask you this. How different was your marketing for this event?
I mean, it completely changed in 3 weeks from, here's the product we have to here's a product we don't know what it is. And I think with that, we just told people to expect that it would be something and we didn't know what it was. And as the days went by, we added to that message.
Yeah, I asked, we just did the virtual MMC that Kunal referred to, and we had 3,000 people, and that was over a 2-week time period, and we sent out 1 email. So it's like stupid times right now, isn't it? In terms of
Absolutely.
what people are willing to do right now. A couple of other questions for you. Talk to me a little bit about what you think AAG gained by going virtual, both from your members' perspective, but also from AAG's perspective.
Well, we certainly learned an awful lot about how to leverage the tools that we have. It was a great experience from that in that regard. So the silver lining of all this craziness. And I think our members really, the ones who were able to participate, they got so much out of it that I think it really set the agenda for us going forward. We already were planning on adding a hybrid meeting to our, hybrid piece to our annual meeting, but this is going to really sort of speed up the future. I think any huge crisis speeds things up, and this one's certainly helping us move that a lot faster forward to where we're having much more virtual content, and probably change the nature of how we do it slowly over time, just to, like you said, Reggie, you can have 2 weeks instead of 1 week. You're not necessarily as constrained, but I do think there's something really important to the temporal unity for an event like this.
Right. It's funny you said that. I'm going to convene a group of folks to have a conversation about that. We're so constrained in our thinking oftentimes about space and time that, nothing would stop AAG or ASAE or anybody else from having, a 10-day annual meeting if you wanted to, or whatever you might want to do if you get those 2 things out of the way. Got 2 more questions, and you started down the path of one of them, but I'll ask you to elaborate if you have any more to elaborate on it. I'm just thinking about what the future of meetings are going to look like for people. Is your strategy going to change? I know you said you were thinking about making sure that you had a hybrid component to your meetings. Is that for all your meetings or for your large meetings? What do you think the future is going to look like for you?
Real easy question.
Yeah, well, we're going to be marketing, next year, 2021, I don't think we have 100% confidence that we're going to be able to have an in-person meeting yet. So we're already thinking about how can we market something that's both virtual and in person, because it's, the risk is there that it won't be able to be in person. I think if we can meet in person, we'll have a really big meeting, and that'll be great, and we'd love that. But I think we'll also have a huge demand for virtual, because the one thing that it does is it opens up the ability for people to attend your event that can't afford to fly or have they can't afford the travel. Maybe they can't take the time. Maybe they're busy with kids. It's just far more accessible to have a virtual option.
Right. So one last question, and then I'll turn this back over to Kunal to get to the other questions there. I think one lesson all associations are learning, at least from what I'm hearing from talking to them, is that things that previously looked like a marketing problem probably was a pricing problem. I see a lot of organizations right now seeing their participation levels triple and quadruple, and their fee and their rates for charging things obviously are half the price. And I think there's some lessons learned there in terms of how associations' business models are going to be affected in the future. Most associations have an annual meeting where some small percentage of their members, especially their non-members, can get to. And so this opens up a lot of doors. So once again, I applaud you for grabbing the bull by the horns, my man, and innovating in the time of crisis. So, Kunal, those were the questions I had.
So what was the question?
I said those were the questions I had. So I'll turn this.
Got it. Great.
Unless you had
Zach, we'll open it up to questions. Thank you so much for those questions, and I'm sure that was helpful. I think one insight we forgot to mention was that we did put a survey out. People were willing. What would you be willing to spend for an all virtual annual meeting? And it ranged from like $50 to $250, and the median was around $100. So people seem willing. Thousands of people would be willing to pay $100 to attend a meeting. It's not going to replace everything, but it's a stat. And as we do more of these, we'll get more of those kinds of stats. Zach, do you mind unmuting and kind of?
Yeah. Wow. All right. So we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. We have over 120 questions. So we'll see what we can get through. Yeah, just a small number of questions. So a lot of the questions center around registration numbers and the number of attendees. Like, how did you compare the number of signups for the live event compared to the virtual event? Was there a significant drop off, or can you speak more about that?
Yeah, we absolutely experienced a drop off. But I think you have to take into consideration what was happening at the time, which was like right at the moment we canceled our meeting, which is an academic meeting, all of the professors who come to our meeting found out that they had to transition all of their course load to online teaching. So I think something had to give. So yeah, we went down, but I'm still impressed with the number of people who signed up in order to attend the virtual meeting that we were able to put together. I think, we counted about 1,500 to 2,000 people that attended. I think we probably got a lot more than that in terms of people who actually showed up to watch the events.
What about you, Reggie? What happened with MMC? You said 3,000 people. What was the expectation? And you're muted.
So typically when we do MMCC, we're probably around the 600 to 700 range in terms of total population at the meeting. We had over 3,000 people registered for MMCC, and I looked at the numbers of people who actually participated yesterday, and we were right around 2,600 all day long.
Stupid time.
Yeah,
it's really good.
So, you spoke more about the hybrid option in the future, and I think everyone's kind of realizing that's going to be a reality. Can you anticipate at this time, do you definitely are confident that there would be different pricing structures for attending virtual versus in person? Or is that still up in the air? You're still exploring that?
We haven't explored it fully, but I think it makes sense to have a different pricing model for the virtual and the in-person. There's just different things to pay for. The thing is, it's not necessarily a savings to go virtual. So telling that message to your audience is important. The biggest cost of a conference, of course, is not the registration fee normally, although for some of us maybe, but for AAG it certainly is not. It's the biggest cost is traveling to the meeting, paying for food in a hotel while you're there. So
now for the sessions and the content of the virtual conference, did you have to change the agenda? Was there did you have to change the way content, like the content itself, like some content just couldn't be presented at all because it was a virtual event?
Basically, we ended up with about 180 sessions, which is like maybe 13 to 15% of what we would have had at a meeting. So our meeting is pretty huge and presentation based. It just is a matter of who was able to present at this point. Although we did add a track of sessions because geographers have a lot to offer to people who study diseases. We added a track of sessions that address COVID specifically. So it was a great opportunity for us to showcase how geography can help in this crisis.
Great. Do you kind of have a rough idea of what were presented live versus what did a pre-recorded version?
As far as percentages, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I would say more happened live than pre-recorded. I think it's a little bit bigger of a task to train people to pre-record things. Although I think that's a really powerful way to do it.
Okay. So you would recommend doing the pre-recorded in the future as much as possible?
I mean, do what works for you, but consider how a person who pre-records their talk can put more effort into it and maybe make it a better talk than something that's live.
Okay.
You know, Oscar, what I'll add to that is we did all of ours as pre-recorded for MMC. I don't know that I would do that again. Don't know that I wouldn't do that again. We need to look at it. But you know, my advice to people is let the content guide them a little bit about that. But what I will say is there's something really magical that happens when the speakers can be there as the recording is playing and interacting with the audience real time. There's just some magic stuff that happens there that doesn't happen in a real live session.
And did you give guidelines or change the rules in certain ways of presenting, like different allotments of time to speak versus live compared to virtual?
We're pretty loose with how we do things at AAG and let the session organizers kind of run their own sessions. But even with that, I mean, the nice thing about virtual was that some sessions went over time and there wasn't really a concern about moving them. So that was pretty cool. You know, when the conversation was hot, you didn't have to kick people out of the room and they still got to like get through what they were getting through. It's just a really nice thing to be able to do.
Now you had everything planned out for the live event. You had your budget projections, you had everything organized, and then this happened with COVID-19. What were your projected budget expectations? Like, how did you adjust your approach? Be like, okay, what am I going to need to budget for now? Or how, like, can you speak more about your immediate financial impact and your adjustments made there?
You're turning red.
AAG is in a very fortunate position where, you know, we have a good reserve. And so we're going to be able to weather this. We definitely didn't make any money. I mean, we had done all the work for it, you know, and we pretty much gave everyone their money back. So that's kind of our story.
I think both AAG and ASAE here, right? They're in it for the long haul because we, of course, we're a big time sponsor of ASAE, and what you guys did, we really appreciate it as a business here. But we get also that this is a multi-year, this is a lifetime relationship, right? And it's a lifetime part of the brand. So both organizations are fortunate, maybe to different degrees compared to some of the other associations. So maybe just wanted to acknowledge that we're gracious to have you guys here. And I think a lot of people listening might not be as fortunate, and just wanted to empathize.
Yeah, I absolutely empathize with that. It's going to be tough. And I think if your content is important, you know, your people will find a way to do it. I mean, I know it's rough, but AAG is looking at ways that we can help other geography associations who might not be able to continue functioning. How can we help them still do their things? Because there's a lot of really little meetings that geographers do that are, you know, the entire purpose of that association is to run that meeting. And now, you know, they're getting tanked. So
yeah,
how can we help pick that up?
With our customers, that they're allowing their like chapter organizations to use their technology free of charge, or they'll foot the bill for it because it's an incremental cost. So I think if you are one of the smaller organizations that doesn't have the reserves or the tech stack or anything like that, just check in with your big brother, big sister part of the organization and see if they're willing to help. That's what we're finding out. People are really willing to help and roll out guides and give you the open source free option, even if it's a little bit more clunky.
In the news, there's been concerns about Zoom and its security. So can you speak more about that aspect? Or did people have concerns about using Zoom? And I have some questions here that some of the attendees and for their members actually refused to use Zoom. So did you have any experiences with that whole issue?
We didn't run into any people that were unwilling to use Zoom. No, I think I'm not knowledgeable enough about the technology to speak to it. I know Reggie and Kunal probably know a lot more, but I feel pretty comfortable with it based on what I've heard from people that understand technology.
Yeah, what I'll add to that is two things. One, Zoom's getting the headlines because Zoom is being used by so many more people than anything else right now. I think they acknowledged that they had a security and privacy problem, probably a privacy problem more than anything else, where they were using people's data in ways that people didn't know necessarily. What I will tell you is that I think they've responded well. The security protocols that they suggest work. Always password protect your meetings. If your meetings are small enough, you can have people admitted individually. But what I will tell you is I haven't had any problems on Zoom that I haven't had in any other of the platforms. They do have some bad press to get through right now. But the flexibility that they have is a reason they're the market leader right now. But I have not had any problems with security and or privacy if I use the guidelines they put forth.
Yeah, and in fairness, those guidelines were published a month ago. So for sure, it's been a challenge, and those that went first had more challenges than those are coming across now. So I think that's a very, very valid question. Yep. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, look, it's new for everyone. We're doing the best we can. But as Reggie said, Zoom's getting the heat. Like Windows had all the viruses back in the 90s because everyone used Windows. If everyone used Apple, they would have been the bad actor. But I would say that the amount that they've added over the last month has given me the confidence to stand behind it, for our organization, right? Because we're making a bet that they're the better tool, the more user-friendly tool. And that worry is one that I share just as well. So I would say that we didn't talk about this much, but like the idea of harassment in general at a conference is very serious. And when you move things online, there could be more bad actors, even from the inside. So in the short term, for sure, Zoom needs to act together, do a lot. The other tools do too. In the long term, I think just having policies around harassment and then just a warning that, look, this is online, anything is possible, to just be mindful that this is the reality of the world we're in. Not like nothing can happen at a hotel. People get sick from food, so it's like, I think it's just something people need to be mindful of, that there's a possibility. We have about 5 minutes, Zach. If there's any couple of questions, we'll definitely read all of them and try our best to get back to everyone, but I want to respect Reggie's time and Oscar's time here.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe just one more here, I think is a good one. And this kind of speaks to the idea of people maybe not technologically inclined, or how do you prepare your speakers for pre-recording? What kind of guidelines do you give your speakers in saying, hey, if you're going to do a pre-recording, this is the best way to do it? Do you have any guidance for speakers in using this new technology?
Well, I did give Kunal all the guidelines that we at AAG had put together, and I'm probably not the only one that's done this, so mine might not be the best. I'm sure, at some point someone should aggregate all of these because there's probably a lot of useful information in there. But yeah, it's,
there's going to be a guide. Reggie sent me a guide, and we have Oscar's guide. So we're going to provide 3 flavors of guides to people. They could download it, make it your own, take our logo off, do whatever you want. All of us just want to get these conferences saved. So we have lots of resources that will be part of the video recording of this.
And you're gonna need to train people for sure. I mean, some speakers aren't going to get it, but we're gonna all need to do this. This is what's happening. So
yeah, maybe one final question, Zach. Looks like we have a little more time.
Yeah.
Are we out of questions?
There's no shortage. Actually, there's more now than we started. How did you kind of figure out how many Zoom licenses you need? Like when you're running a conference, you have sessions and you have all these things going on. How do you figure out, and what was the best strategy in licensing Zoom?
I just treated each session as sort of, I kind of kept things in rooms, except they were tracks. So each Zoom license went to one track. So at any specific time, you were using one Zoom license, kind of using that license as a room. But I think that the technology is already advanced past me needing to do that now.
Okay. And if you were to start all of this again, how much time would you allow yourself and your organization to prepare for a virtual conference?
I mean, right now I'm planning for 2021 now to be virtual. So the typical year, I think it's going to take some time to, probably it's going to take more than a year to really get it right. So, we did this first experiment, and the next one will be a little better. Within 3 years, I think we'll have a really, really solid virtual experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Oscar, we're in a place now where we're having to do things in a compressed time schedule, which doesn't allow us to take advantage of what's in front of us. Doing a meeting virtually, there's so many more tools we can bring to bear on the experience that we just can't do live, at least not do cost effectively live. So don't think that all your meetings can be done in this compressed time period. Give you yourself some time to be innovative.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Reggie. I think these insights have been valuable to everyone. For those that are participating, we do see your questions. I will try to follow up directly with Oscar and Reggie to get them answered and send a follow-up email. In addition, after this webinar ends, you'll be taken to a survey. It'll be anonymous because we're asking you about things like budget and so forth. We'll use that, of course, to help us tailor our product and our roadmap, but we also will share this data to everyone who participated so that you guys get a sense of where your expectations fall within there. So we wanted to make it anonymous so that people felt comfortable giving us some of that information. It's going to be aggregated and not personalized. So we do want to share that back to the community. Once again, we're just one player in this, right? We provide the gallery, we connect to Zoom. We need people to help. We only have so many staff that can help with the AV, right? There's more conferences that are out there. And our goal here is just to be one of the conduits. Of course, ASAE is the most major conduit that you should be going to for information, but we want to be at the forefront of this and helping. So with that, I wish there was a round of applause we could do, but I really want to thank Oscar and Reggie for joining.
Thank you, Kunal. I have
look at that. Everyone's raising their hand. I like it.
I don't mind that.
I have two thoughts that I want to put out there because I think they're important, and I don't know that we touched on them quite enough, but we did bring them up. The one was the anti-harassment thing. AAG has a very robust anti-harassment policy at our conference, and it was important to us to keep that going. So I would encourage you, just make sure that you're following your own rules as you go forward with this. The other thing is, I think with virtual options, there is such a potential to have a much more accessible meeting. So, with closed captioning, with different languages, with making it easier for people with disabilities to attend and participate, I think we can really do a lot there. It's not something that I was able to accomplish as well as I wanted to at this meeting, but I think it's on my mind, and it should be on all of our minds.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. I'll give you guys a call afterwards for a quick personal thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the webinar.